The other children's birthday tradition items include abacus, calligraphy brush, and stethoscope. But for my first birthday tradition, my family prepared something different for me. The head of a weasel, the claws of a fox, the scales of a python, the quills of a hedgehog, the tail of a mouse. All because everyone in my family practices shamanism. My grandfather is a diviner who can determine life and death from 1,000 miles away. My grandmother is a Taoist priestess proficient in exorcism, capable of guiding both the living and the malevolent spirits. My father is a celestial fate diviner able to predict celestial secrets and foresee the future. My mother, on the other hand, is a reincarnated fox spirit with extraordinary cultivation skills. And it's precisely because everyone in my family practices divination, revealing celestial secrets, resulting in both my parents leaving this world shortly after my birth. But when it came to my first birthday tradition, none of those 5 great diviners took notice. Instead, I crawled straight to a paper effigy of the Yoma, the king of hell, and held onto it tightly, refusing to let go. Even more astonishingly, I directly plucked out the Yoma's 2 eyeballs and swallowed them. My grandmother, fearing retaliation from the Yoma, immediately made 2 decisions. First, she decided to retire from the divination world, vowing never to reveal any celestial secrets again in her lifetime. Secondly, she gave me a humble name, hoping that the Lord Yoma would be magnanimous and not bother with a mere child like me. When I reached the age to learn reading, my grandmother refused to pass on her skills to me, fearing that the Yoma would have eyes on me. But my grandfather didn't believe in such superstitions. He secretly taught me feng shui and fortune telling. I was born to this trade. I could recite the Book of Changes by the age of 3. I could transcribe Qimeng Dunjiao, mystical gates and hidden chi, by the age of 4. By the age of 5, I had even developed my own system of feng shui. After my grandfather saw this, he sighed and said to my grandmother, in the future, he will surely be a big demon in the feng shui circle. Just when I thought my future was boundless and I could become the most powerful feng shui master in the Northeast. At the age of 26, I suddenly lost my sight, becoming completely blind. My grandmother blamed my grandfather for teaching me feng shui, believing it had provoked retaliation from the Yoma. My grandfather remained silent, his face grim, as he left the house without a word. 7 days later, my grandfather returned with a cardboard box. With a solemn expression, he said to me, "Sample, this thing can cure your eyes." Before I could inquire further, my grandmother screamed in terror, "Old fool, there's something wrong with your face." But my grandfather chuckled and said, "It's just dark underneath." I accidentally let the in spirit touch my face. "It's bothering me." I quickly asked Grandpa what's underneath. "What's a in spirit?" But my grandfather didn't say anything. He passed away that very night. After my grandfather's death, my grandmother was traumatized and also lost her sanity. During the day, she locked herself in the house and sang eerie opera tunes. At night, she sneaked into the cemetery behind the village to eat offerings left for the deceased. During that time, I learned how to live independently as a blind person. Through repeated practice, I even became capable of going to the village entrance alone to bask in the sun and return home without getting lost. But every evening, I would take out that cardboard box and search through it meticulously. Even though it was empty, even though I had thoroughly inspected it, I couldn't shake the feeling of discontent. This was something my grandfather had risked his life for. He could have cured my eyes with it. But as time passed, I grew accustomed to being alone in the darkness, and I lost all hope of recovery. One day, a matchmaker from the village arrived uninvited, claiming that my grandfather had arranged a betrothal for me when I was young. The girl was from a wealthy family in the city. I replied with a smile, "So you're here to cancel the engagement?" The matchmaker slapped her thigh and said, "Cancel? Nonsense. The girl already knew about your blindness, but she said she'll only marry you in this lifetime. Whether you're blind or not doesn't matter to her. Girl, I brought her here. You two chat well." With that, the matchmaker left. I fell silent for a moment, then addressed the darkness, "Young lady, how old are you? What should I call you?" But the only response I received was a deafening silence. After a while, there was a loud click at the door, and finally, the girl left. After they left, I sat alone at home meditating. I remained in meditation until the evening, when I felt the urge to relieve myself, prompting me to get off the cot. To my surprise, just as I was about to pull down the zipper, I heard a soft, gentle voice behind me saying, "Let me help you with that." I was startled and I shuddered. You didn't leave." The girl softly replied, "I've been here all along." I hastily and awkwardly fled. It's actually quite terrifying when I think about it. It had been over 2 hours since the matchmaker left until that moment. During that time, a stranger had been staring at me from close proximity, and I hadn't even heard her breathe. At that moment, the girl sat beside me and said, "Don't be afraid. I'm here to fulfill our engagement and that's all. I suddenly caught a whiff of the fragrance emanating from her, the pervasive scent of gardenia flowers tinged with an intensely dangerous wildness. My name is Ouyang Wei. I'm 22 years old. Our engagement was arranged by your grandfather and my father. If you don't believe me, you can ask your grandmother, she said. To her I said whether we marry or not isn't really important. What I want to know is, as a disabled person, what do you see in me? My words made Ouyang Wei pause for a moment, then she softly replied, I didn't think of it as complicated. I just believe in honoring agreements as a matter of principle. Besides, you're quite handsome and I think we're a good match. Whether you're blind or not doesn't matter to me. Worst case scenario, I'll earn money to support you. Just as I was about to respond, my grandmother from the next room shouted, Sample, aren't you going to serve dinner? I got so caught up in our conversation that I forgot to prepare dinner for my grandmother. As I was about to get up to cook, Ouyang Wei insisted that I rest, and she immediately went to the kitchen and started bustling about. While this girl appeared very virtuous, I couldn't bring myself to trust a single word she said. I immediately cautiously called my grandmother over and asked Grandma, did our family and the Ouyang family arrange a marriage? My grandmother shook her head in denial, saying, I've never heard of such a thing. Then, upon seeing Ouyang Wei bustling in the kitchen, my grandmother suddenly screamed, the in-spirit that killed your grandfather has come. Sample, hurry and kill her. But I remained unfazed, because my grandmother often spoke nonsense. After my grandfather's death, she referred to all women as in-spirits. In no time, Ouyang Wei had prepared the meal. But as my grandmother was eating, she suddenly said, you have no shadow. Ouyang Wei replied with a smile, of course I do. Isn't this it? Upon hearing this, my grandmother fell silent and didn't speak again. Whether Ouyang Wei was human or a ghost, my grandmother could easily ask the old immortal. The discernment of the Taoist priest is notoriously sharp. My grandmother worshipped a Taoist deity who is about to transform into a dragon, indicating profound spiritual attainment. After my grandfather's death, my grandmother was deeply affected, and she hasn't spoken to the Taoist priest in a long time since she went mad. After dinner, my grandmother went back to her room to sing eerie opera tunes. Ouyang Wei finished cleaning up the dishes and sat next to me silent. Later, Ouyang Wei initiated the conversation. Unfortunately, you don't even know what I look like. I reached out my hands and asked, may I touch your face? Ouyang Wei took the initiative and pressed my hand against her face. I carefully traced the contours of her face. I realized that even though I couldn't see, I could sense her breathtaking beauty through the touch of my hands. Am I beautiful? Ouyang Wei asked me with a smile. You're okay. It's getting late. You should go back and not come again, I said with a double meaning. We haven't even held the wedding ceremony yet. Ouyang Wei chuckled and replied, I don't know you. Please leave immediately, I said with anger in my tone. We can first the bridal chamber, then the wedding ceremony, Ouyang Wei said boldly. In a fit of rage, I lunged at her, but how could I catch her? After struggling for a while, I was left panting and exhausted. Suit yourself. I can't be bothered to say anything more. I stripped off my clothes and lay down on the bed. I heard Ouyang Wei probably lie down on the sofa beside me. I couldn't sleep. Will you talk to me for a while? Feeling bored as well, I started chatting with her. From her I learned that she was studying psychology, specializing in hypnosis. She even mentioned that in the future she might be able to use hypnosis to help me regain my sight. And I just smiled in response. But then I heard Ouyang Wei quickly walk to my bed and whisper to me, there are 3 more people in your house. I felt a chill down my spine and quickly grabbed the dagger hidden under my pillow. My first instinct was that Ouyang Wei's accomplices had arrived. This was all part of her plan. And her only concern, her grandmother, had already fallen asleep. It was the perfect time to strike, because her demeanor was too calm. A normal girl would have been screaming in fear by now. But she wasn't afraid at all.